Hello and welcome to the Gauntlet Podcast. Each month, we look back at games that we played with the Gauntlet folks in the Gauntlet community. And my name is Rae. I use they, he pronouns. I'm very happy to be one of the co-hosts for the podcast. And joining me today is another wonderful co-host, David, who uses he, him pronouns. David, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, thank you. Spring has finally decided to make an appearance. Last couple of days I've been able to leave the house in short sleeves. It's all been very pleasant. So yeah, thank you very much.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I always just dream about spring and winter here in tropical Philippines. But yeah. And also we're joined by Andrea, who uses she, her pronouns. And so Andrea Rick is queer, non-binary, and she is a TTRPG designer, graphic designer, editor, translator, and occasional educator from Germany. Her games are available at CuriousCat.itch.io. Andrea, we're so happy to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to talk to you about games.
Yeah, and Andrea's like super active in the TTRPG space. I definitely recommend checking out CuriousCat on Twitter too. I love what Andrea talks about on Twitter. So for our first segment, each of us gets to go over the RPGs we played in January and February, and we talk in depth about one game that we played on the Gauntlet calendar. So let's start with David. How was your gaming in January and February?
Yeah, thank you. It's been a fairly quiet start to the year, I will say. I spoke a little about this in our chat actually, but I have been kind of struggling more so at the beginning of this year with just getting games out there, getting games organised. I'm hoping things are going to start getting a little better now that my brain's in a better place. And as I say, spring is arriving, which is always a good shot in the arm for me. But I have managed to still get to play a few games over the last couple of months. I got to play a one-shot Bluebeard's Bride, which was really, really good. I enjoyed that a lot. It's a game I'd like to revisit, and I think I will probably would like to speak about that, hopefully, in future once I've had another chance to experience it again. But enjoyed that a lot. I got to play a playtest game of Agatha's game currently called the Teenage Detective Game, which was a whole lot of fun. Mm-hmm. So that was great. Looking forward to seeing what comes next from Agatha on that. I've also just started a game, as of February, I just started a game of Legacy Life Among the Ruins, and I finished up a campaign of the Twilight Throne, which we'll be discussing a little bit more in detail later on. Yeah. But the game I want to talk about today is Masks: A New Generation by Brendan Conway. So this game probably needs no introduction really, but you know, that's what they pay me the big bucks to do here, so I will. It is a powered by the apocalypse game of teenage superheroes or young adult superheroes, depending on how you spin it. I nearly always tend to default to teens, but there you go. And this is a game that's obviously emulates that very specific genre of superhero stories about teens and younger adults. It's less about it's not only about the big climactic fights and all of this, but also the kind of messy emotional lives of the characters, them working out who they are, who they want to be, how they can be who they want to be, all those sort of big coming of age type tropes. The game in particular of it that I ran was was run by Sawyer on the Gauntlet. We used the Spiderweb playset from one of the expansion books. The Spiderweb sort of reframes the game into being much more street level superheroes. So rather than going off and fighting Galactus or whoever, it's much more sort of you're like Jessica Jones, Luke Cage.
Yeah.
Exactly,
cool,
yeah.
Cool.
Which was great. And I have to say, and as we get onto the stuff that I liked about the game, that is absolutely one of the bits I really like about it. It's not so much that I think there can be a tendency for superhero media and games that sort of veer into that more street level stuff to go, street level has to mean really like super gritty and dark and everything's bad. But that's not so much the side of it I like. I think the bit that I like about going for a more street level setting is I am not sophisticated when it comes to superhero media. I still maintain the best Batman is Adam West Batman. I like the more kind of I like the media that leans a bit more into that kind of campy nature of the superheroics, or is a bit more realistic, but still keeps things on a slightly more kind of subdued level, I suppose. So that's why I find like the Spiderweb is always a really nice setting for me, because it kind of gets people much more down to earth. I'm not super interested in a lot of the more like cosmic level superhero stuff. It just doesn't interest me as much. I like the kind of closer stuff. So that's a big positive for me is that using that setting, but also specifically in the game that we ran, as I sort of alluded to in the discussion we had, even though we were playing it at street level, it was still a very hopeful game. It was a very, a game where the kids still had a chance to be kids. Well, except for me, because I was playing a straight up Batman analog who was very dour, but it was all in all, I think we kind of got a nice optimistic tone to the game. We got to deal with some sort of hard subject matter, but also sort of have a sort of come together and bond and all of the good stuff over it as well. Which sort of brings me into the next bit of what I really like about Masks and what I think always works really well at the table, which is the way that conditions work, just in general. In particular, the way that conditions are cleared. So again, I'm sure that most people listening to this will have at least some familiarity with Masks, but essentially conditions are sort of side effects that you can take on as a result of stuff happening in the fiction. I'm not going to do a full list, but you've got things like angry, insecure, afraid, those sort of emotional conditions that can be applied to your character, which can come about either kind of through direct confrontation or through other mechanics of the game. They kind of affect what things your character can do, so they each basically apply penalties onto certain actions that you can take. But the thing that I really, really like about the conditions is that each condition essentially has a way that you can just remove it. And it is essentially by doing something that you probably shouldn't do. It's by acting out. So, for instance, you can clear angry by breaking something or hurting somebody. Things like that. You can is it insecure that you clear by acting in a self-sacrificing way? I may have that slightly switched around, but those sort of things. And what I really like about that is that it not only kind of rewards you for taking those kind of interesting story beats with your character, but it kind of gives you license to take them as well. It says, certainly earlier in sort of my story game career, there are those points where you think, I'd kind of like to do this, but will that just mess things up for everyone else? And this is the game kind of actively reaching out to you and saying, no, you are allowed to do things that are not the optimal move for the team, by kind of meaning it's like it isn't the optimal. Maybe it is something that's going to put other team members in jeopardy or upset people or whatever else. But in a game's mechanical way, it often is the best way of acting. And I really like that way that sort of reinforces and it lets you play out those tense moments and sort of explosive moments in the story, which I think is great. And we had some good moments of that throughout the game. And I think those are really the aside from just saying that the game in general is obviously a classic and a classic for a reason. It's very good. It's a very solid game. Really nails its tone. Really delivers, I think, on certainly what I am looking for from a superhero game. So that's sort of kind of thumbs up for me on that front. The stuff that I think the game perhaps doesn't do quite as well or occasionally causes trouble, it's a very kind of edge thing. There's a couple of moves around. I think I've said this on a podcast before, but I find that the kind of finding out information moves are often just not very interesting. In PBTA games in general, I think you have to work to make them come across as interesting. And I do find I run into that sometimes in Masks, where just the questions aren't quite there to support what you're wanting to find out, or just not make it interesting. And I think a lot of the time it's just more interesting to just be given answers than it is to make a roll to see if you get answers or not, and all that sort of thing. It's a very minor complaint in the whole, but it is one there that I still think there's just a couple of aspects like that where I think there are occasionally things where you reach for a move and there isn't anything there to support you when it feels like there really ought to be. But overall, I think that the most of the moves I think are actually done very well. I just think there's a few gaps, and I think that those sort of like information moves are particularly one of them in a game where you might expect to do a bit of like investigating. The other one, which is a very, very, very minor bit of the game, but like a real continual annoyance for me. The game uses this system of having like end of session questions to award XP, make some changes to your character, as a lot of games do. But the questions in Masks I find really, really uninspired. They also The questions are okay. They're all to do with like your relationship to the team. So it's essentially, did you go closer to the team? Did you move away from the team, or did you sort of move into your own image of yourself? Which are fine as questions go, or I suppose question. It's sort of asking you which of those three you pick. And I think aside from just the fact that the questions, the answers, the questions, which way I'm framing it is, aren't that interesting. They can lead to some interesting sort of introspection, but I don't feel that they push the game forward like the end of session questions in, say, The Between or Thirsty Sword Lesbians do. Those questions all kind of ask you to do something in the game to get to that point, whereas in Masks, they're much more about, okay, now that you've got to the end of the session, how do you think it went? Which I don't find as engaging. The other thing as well is the rewards you get for which questions you answer are all different, and honestly, there is one that is good. The other two are okay.
Not so good, yeah.
Yeah. Essentially, you get XP if you grew close to the team. The other two are kind of they're fine, but yeah, mechanically speaking, you always want to be choosing that one. Little hint in there, but I think, like I said, it's a very, very minor part of the game. It's just that every single time we get to the end of session questions, I just always roll my eyes a little bit, because it's just like, it could just be a little bit better. It doesn't even need to be a lot better, just slightly better. And I think it would just add in that little bit of something to the game that kind of helps it. Yeah, to sort of contribute more to the the way the game is actually played, I think, by making those questions a bit more integral to how people play out. A bit like my favourite playbook, The Beacons, that sort of critical moments. I've completely blanked on the actual name for it. But
the moment of truth?
No, the kind of checklist of superheroic deeds that you have to check off.
Right. Yeah. Because the Beacon's always trying to be cool and a hero. Yeah, I love that mechanically. I get so sad hardly anyone plays a Beacon whenever
I have to restrain myself from just always picking Beacon. That's but yeah, that's that is Masks. And I think it's probably, as I say, we've covered the game a lot on previous podcasts, so I'm not going to drive this into the ground. But yeah, just to say, I really enjoyed it. I had a very good fun game with it. I'm eager to play more of it, and I think I'm eager to get back to running some in probably a slightly more, as I said, that slightly more campy. No, it doesn't even have to be unserious, but just that, like, I like superheroes who all wear disguises. It's like, if you're not wearing disguise, are you really a superhero? It's like, but yeah, I definitely want to get more, play more, run more. It's always an evergreen to return to. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say about Masks for today.
Yeah. And Masks is so interesting because it's I think, if I'm remembering correctly, it's the PBTA game I've run the most. And yeah, but I think it's also a good sign that as good as Masks is, as much as I still love it, it's also showing its age. I don't know how else to say that without it sounding like but I feel like that's a good sign, right? Because I feel like it means that PBTA games and story games have shifted in such a way. Like when you brought up the thing about the questions, I was like, oh yeah. Masks works really well for long campaigns, right? Like 4 to 6 to 12 sessions or longer, and going through those same questions again and again can really be a thing. But what do you think, Andrea?
Masks is actually the first PBTA game I ever played when I had no idea what PBTA games even were, or basically had a very little idea of what TTRPGs in general even were. But when you just described the conditions, I thought, yeah, that is such a good mechanic to show these messy teenagers with the feelings all over the place, and you act out and you do things you later regret. I feel like that's so a really cool mechanic to tie into that. Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, actually, it was Masks that finally broke me out of D&D, because I kept trying other PBTA and indie games and I couldn't quite wrap my head around it, because D&D is like we're not going to go into it, but it's a different mindset, right? And I think Masks finally broke through because of my intense love for superhero comics, but also it's such a beautifully designed game. So yeah, interesting. Always fun to come back to Masks, I think.
Yeah, I will have something later that also ties back to Masks, so I'll save that for the second portion.
Nice. Nice.
Excellent.
Perfect. But yes, speaking of which, so Andrea, why don't you tell us about your games in January, February, and you can sneak in a March game if you like.
I will. I played a surprising number of repeat games for me, and I did play Off Gauntlet. I played Paranormal Inc., Behind the Magic. I played Hearts of Wooleen in the Scott Pilgrim versus the World setting, which was amazing. Again, messy young adults, feelings all over the place, gigantic music, fights. That was great. I played Brindlewood Bay and Wonder Home and participated in, I think, 2 playtests for Yaziba's Bed and Breakfast, which I'm super excited about.
It's so
good. I played Sexy Hairdresser Vampires, which is a Lasers and Feelings hack, and Lasers and Feelings, the original. And I played my own game, Miss Bernborg's Finishing School for Young Ladies, which is a Firebrands game set in the 1950s. And I feel like that's always fun. I played Ocean Tides, another Firebrands game, and I played A Cozy Den, where you play a group of lesbian snakes who have gathered for winter, and it's basically a mix of roommate drama and romance, if you want to go there. Lovely. I enjoyed it a lot. And I had a first session of, I don't know how many sessions we're going to have, but I played actually my first session of Monster Hearts yesterday.
Excellent.
Ooh,
But again,
nice.
messy teenagers. Great fun. And on the Gauntlet, I played Monster Care Squad, which I feel like I didn't really get into I sort of had a hard time with the mechanics, but I really enjoyed the setting and some part of the character creation. I played, again, a game that I'm co-creating with Sandra, my co-designer, which is currently called Viva la Queer Bar, which is a descended from the Queen game about a queer bar. And we play tested that, and yes, that was also very cool to get some international eyes on the game. And I'm currently in a series of Brindlewood Bay Emeritus, which is basically Brindlewood Bay is set in a college town where we all have ties to this college, which is great fun so far. And I played The Girlfriend of My Girlfriend is My Friend. It was meant to be a 2-shot. It just turned out to be just a 1-shot, sadly, but that's the game I'm going to talk a bit more about, and I can already tell you that I really hope to play it again because it's great. So, The Girlfriend of My Girlfriend is My Friend is designed by Sasha Winter, who is on itch as Stargazer Sasha, and the game is described as a light-hearted little RPG about the hilarious disaster that is being trans and a young adult. And I feel like that captures it really well. It's definitely a game about being trans, and what I really like is that it's not focused on the injustice that we talk about a lot in the real world, but it focuses on trans people spending time with each other, expressing their feelings, doing creative things, and basically being a community. And while things may get messy because of all the entanglements between the characters, the assumption is that they always still want to get along. And I feel like that's a feeling I recognize a lot from queer communities. Like, this is all we have, so we kind of have to get along. And while some of the playbooks allude to violence or suicidal ideation, but you don't have to go there if you don't want to. It's vague enough that you can just take that into a different direction or just not pick these options. And the characters have always personal social goals that they want to get met multiple times over their personal arc, and they're working towards an individual finale, and that's also interesting. Mechanically, the playbooks have moves they can always do, but there are no tokens, no dice, and the game can be played with or without a GM. And there's 10 playbooks in the core game and a bunch of others by other designers that are also up on itch. What I really liked about the game that also says that it's about art, magic, and identity. First of all, the art. It's been designed in MS Paint, and I love that. It's wildly colorful. There's little scribbles and drawings to match the playbooks. And that is very fun. It's also very hard to read, but there's a plain text version too, so you can just use that if you have issues with the scribbly aesthetic. One element of the game is that the magical power of the characters, or some characters, is created by their aesthetic power, so personal style, or music, or quilting, or graffiti. And the characters can also learn magic from each other. And I feel like that also is a thing that for me feels very youthful. Like all these subcultures that have their distinct styles and music and art and clothes. And that's also a queer thing, because I feel like many queer people use aesthetics to express who we are and what our gender is, what kinds of people we're interested in, and so on.
So obviously you're saying that there's magic in this. Is it sort of like a Monster Heart style urban fantasy thing, or is it more kind of like magical realist, weirdness, or some combination of the two?
I feel like it feels more magical realism, like it's based on the real world and there's just a little bit magic sprinkled in there.
Cool.
What I really enjoyed about the session we played is that we decided, we were like, in what time is this set in? And we decided to go with the sex education approach, like the Netflix show, that it feels like it's at the same time in the 80s and the 90s and now. And because it has references to all these decades, and
the
that worked really well with that game. Because you could just pick things from your own youth and add the internet, basically, for me, and that was great fun. And my favorite scene was when two characters went to an enchanted zine fest, and then their hands touched accidentally on purpose while they were looking at a cursed zine, and that was great. Another thing I really enjoy about the game is the playbook names. They're really evocative, and there's things like the trans girl who's really into architecture, or the lesbian who's in a band and holy shit, he's so fucking cool, or these two goths, or the other werewolf, and so on and so on. And there's a wide variety of personalities and themes you can explore in that game. And I feel like there's lots of options to find something you click with or you want to explore for that session or that campaign. And you can also get initial character entanglements like friendship or romance or hookups, your roommates, you know each other through work or art, and they may or may not involve conflict right from the get-go. And I feel like that's also a really good starting point to actually tell stories later on between the characters. And one cool mechanical element that the game has is that it gives you a pick list of things that are on your mind during the first scene. And I think that's just a genius way to get started, to give the character some emotion or goal. So, okay, because you always have this, and where do we start? And this, I feel like, bridges that gap really well. And it reminded me a bit of it felt like a very shortened version of what Firebrand's games do, with the, where are you? How did you get there? What do the other characters notice? And that's basically just all of that squished together into one little pick list.
Ooh.
Yeah, I said before, I really feel like the game allows you to give an accurate portrait of queer and trans communities. You definitely you can tell that it's from an inside perspective. And there's this constant tension between the messy feelings and actions and relationships, and where you actually don't get along or you have conflicting goals, and also the necessity and a desire for mutual support on the other hand, and of course romantic relationships and friendship relationships between the characters. That was cool. I want to point out another mechanic that I thought that was really cool, is that at the end of every scene, every character can learn a new move they can always do that reflects how they grew in that scene. And you can pick that from another playbook, for example, if another character showed you something, or you can just make it up yourself if you feel like that's what you need. And you can also cross out old moves that you feel don't apply. And I feel like that's also a good reflection of being a young adult and growing and trying things and learning things from your friends and influencing each other. And I feel like I have to say at least one thing that I wasn't as sure about. That is also, I feel like if you're used to a very high drama-oriented play style where you try to get lots of conflict and lots of drama and lots of action, this game does not allow that very much. So you have to adjust to the idea that this is slice of life game. This is low key. This is just everyday life for these characters. And there's little dramatic moments, but nothing like we have to save the world or some other huge things.
Yeah. I think that's something I've encountered with sort of. I still feel like I'm only dipping my toe into like sort of belonging outside belonging style games, and yeah, that is one thing I think you have to kind of recalibrate down to thing. We're not trying to create a plot or an arc. We are just focusing on the characters, kind of thing. So I think that's definitely something that requires a moment.
A shift. Yeah, and also like when for me, when I try to create BOB games that do have an arc or dramatic moments, it's very difficult, right? Because the system kind of encourages this slice of life approach. So really interesting.
Yeah, I feel like that's a situation I run into often with like slice of life games in particular, and I feel like you have to really, really emphasize that when you put out the call for a game, or when you inform your players what type of game is this, does the game expect us to do, so the mechanics make sense. But I feel like that's just a matter of communicating things to your players and clarifying expectations. Right. And another nitpicky thing I have, like so many other GM-less games, it doesn't actually teach you how to set up a scene or how to work towards a finale. And that's the reason why I wouldn't necessarily recommend The Girlfriend of My Girlfriend Is My Friend to complete newbies, unless there's at least one or two more experienced players or a GM who can sort of guide the action and give prompts in the group. But I really enjoyed it, and my basic takeaway is that I would like to play it again. So have either of you played it?
No,
I haven't, but it does sound cool. And like I said, I do want to actively try and get around to playing more belonging outside belonging type games and that sort of slice of life feeling stuff, which, like I said, I think it's funny because it is sometimes, it almost feels more difficult to not go to like big dramatic pulls. It's that sort of, it's very easy to have, the man walk into a gun and start shooting, but it can sometimes be a bit more difficult to say, hey, maybe we're just like hanging out somewhere.
Yeah, 100%. And I really feel like it's so nice to have more games that are engaging in that space, especially from, I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of it is from a queer space, right? I think, there's a desire for us to create a space where we can just exist and be without conflict, without, so but I'm really excited. I love what Sasha's doing in the space, in the TTRPG space. I do want to say that Sasha has an itch.io game jam called the Trans Fucking Rage Game Jam, which started on March 9th all the way until April 11th. So even if you're listening later, you can check it out and see what games were submitted. And it's really very cool. I'm really excited about it. I'll see if I can join myself, but I encourage other people to do so, especially if you're trans. We want to see more games. But
Yes. And I also want to, if people have bought the big Ukraine bundle, The Girlfriend of My Girlfriend Is My Friend is in there.
Yeah, nice.
It may be in the trans bundle. I haven't checked that, but
and in case people don't know how to search, you can like type it in the search bar, right? And it'll come up. Like the great thing about these bundles is that there's so many games. The challenging thing about these bundles is that there's so many games, so we need to use the search bar. But for sure.
I have another thought on the slice of life games, because sometimes I wonder if that's a thing that we sort of absorb from, especially Western storytelling. That there's always a story and it has a beginning and a middle and an end, and we have the 3-act structure, or like the classic theater arc. And I wonder if that's why we seem to default to these stories so often, and why it's so hard to adjust to a game like, I don't know, Wonder Home that says there is no story. We have vignettes, or it's just a journey, and you just go places and meet people and look at the landscape and be affected by everything. And you're not there to save the world. You're not there to fix other people's problems. And that's such an unusual perspective to take. And I mean, I'm not a manga person, but I feel like I've read somewhere that there's a whole subgroup of manga or anime that is slice of life and that tells these stories. So if anyone, if either of you knows about that, I basically just know what I just said.
Yeah, one of my favorite slice of life animes, Clover. That one's really, really good. It's super great. You were going to say, David?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I've definitely seen a couple of really good anime that are that sort of thing. I can't think of names off the top of my head, unfortunately, for recommendations. But I also just wanted to say that, Wonder Home is like top of my list at the minute for games I really want to get around to playing, but I've just not quite grokked it enough yet to feel confident facilitating.
I would drag you into a game, David.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah, that would love that.
I would drag you into it.
Thank you
For sure. I love, and also Yazabuzz is another great slice of life experience. I got to try the playtest.
That's a lot of fun.
You can play a whole chapter in an hour or less.
Ooh, very nice.
It is wild.
Yeah.
Wild.
And it gives you a bit more structure than Wonder Home. So if you prefer to have some sort of orientation, what you're supposed to do and what mechanics you can interact with,
it might be a good way to jump into it.
Yeah,
because Wonder Home is so open. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point.
Yeah.
But so for my month of January and February, I also had a pretty slow start to the year compared to the usual. I only have like 5 games. I can't remember the last time I just wrote down 5 games that I played. So off the gauntlet, I got to play Godbound and Thirsty Sword Lesbians, as well as Blades in the Dark, which is super, super fun. As always, Godbound has been very interesting because it's my first real attempt to play OSR more often, but we keep not interacting with the mechanics. Like, literally the last time I did something and the GM said, I should roll against it, but I like what you said so much that I'm not going to do it. And I was like, okay.
I thought that was supposed to be the point of OSR, that you just don't actually engage with the rules. That's
Oh, so maybe that's it. Maybe I'm doing it properly and I didn't know. Okay, yeah. So on the gauntlet, I got to play Heart, the City Beneath, which I talked about on an episode here. And I also got to play the Twilight Throne and the Houses of Ruin, which is a Forge in the Dark game I'm working on. That's what I'm going to talk about, if people will indulge me once again talking about one of the games I'm working on. So basically, the Twilight Throne, it's been through many names. We finally settled on one. Thank you once again, the Gauntlet community and the Slack for helping me come up with a name. I just took bits and pieces from what people suggested. Yeah, so it was my attempt to make a political intrigue game using the Forge in the Dark system. I didn't think I'd be able to pull it off. I don't want to say I did 100%. I'm going to be more confident. I did pull it off to create the kind of political intrigue game that I am interested in. And thankfully, a lot of other people have also been interested in it. So it features surreal magic, tragic intimacy, and I think the more I work in the game, the more I realize it is a post-colonial approach to political intrigue, which I realize is very different from the Western concept. So it's been a really fun challenge designing that into the game. And I'm really looking forward to it. So what worked for me, number one, in playtesting this game, it is a game that's best over a long campaign, like several sessions. And so this is the first time in years that I had such a long campaign. So this last playtest, we had 30 sessions, so wild, and we had a finale. There's so many times, right, where you have this long series and then you just don't get the finale. I was so worried that it was going to happen. It did not happen. I was so happy we had a finale. And this is my 3rd playtest group. We tested the Throne of Insurrection. So basically, each throne provides a narrative structure to build your campaign around. This is inspired by Grow by Moonlight, another Forge in the Dark game I love that's not out yet, but it's going through editing. Very excited. Going to be released with Bevo Hat. And in Grow by Moonlight, they have like series playsets instead, so you can have different flavors of magical girl stuff. And so I took from that to have different narrative arcs for Twilight Throne. And so the Throne of Insurrection is about taking control of a prophecy and creating a false chosen one, a lowly human. So the players make the chosen one, and in turn, the human rebellion stronger. So it's been really a lot of fun. It got really dramatic. I get so emotional when I think about how this human rose, how he grew from this really like open, endearing YA protagonist to this almost tragic character. In the end, it was very cool. And yeah, I also realized that I don't believe in making one game that's meant to represent all of what you want, right? So that also applies to political intrigue, right? In the same way that I don't think there should only be one fantasy game or only one superhero game or only one slice of life game, right? So instead, I'm making one that I really enjoy running and playing. And hopefully that's also fun for other people to run and play. And so there's a lot of magic, there's a lot of intimacy, there's a lot of plot and character complexity. And it's been really super fun engaging with that. Actually, one of the weird things is I kept coming up with dark fantasy, dark fairy tale things, and people kept telling me, oh yeah, that's in Dark Souls. And I would look it up, and it was really in Dark Souls. It's I don't know if we are drawing from the same ether, but it keeps happening. So anyway, I gave in. I made a whole throne that's just about Dark Souls kind of like vibe. Just went straight for it.
Just to chime in there, I mean, I've played in a lot of playtest sessions for this, and I can concur that it is indeed a very, very fun political intrigue game. One of the things I think that for me worked really well to hijack this moment is to say I think that the way that you drew on Forged in the Dark, it did the bits of Forged in the Dark that I've always heard about, as it were, and I've always seen her in the game, but I've never really quite come across in the games of say Blades in the Dark that I've played, which is that being able to just jump in with a flashback, or not even a flashback, but just saying, well, yes, I was prepared for this, or I know that all this was part of my master plan, because I feel like the moves and the sphere of action in this game is so wide. In Blades in the Dark, it can get a bit bogged down, did I unpick the lock to this door, when that's, even in the game text itself, it's like, that shouldn't be the level of action you're looking at. But I feel like in this, because that what you can do is so wide and widely affecting, it really lets you play into that, like having big dramatic flashbacks where you reveal stuff. I was continually being someone else in disguise and all that sort of fun stuff. It was so yes, I can say it is certainly a hell of a lot of fun to play.
That sounds amazing.
So what I'm less sure about the Twilight Throne is, okay, so in total we've had more than 50 sessions. I don't remember the last time I playtested a single game that much. But playtesting Forged in the Dark games can be hard. I feel like there's a lot of interlocking systems. And so that's something I still have to consider. Also, long campaigns have their own core issues, like how to keep track of several plot threads, how to make peace with the ones that go by the wayside. I definitely have to consider how I'll approach this design-wise, if at all. But my main takeaway about the Twilight Throne so far is that the Gauntlet is still my favorite place to playtest. I definitely could not have managed 50 sessions and 3 playtest groups without the Gauntlet. I'm so grateful. In fact, for one playtest, it was Leandra who ran the game, so that's such a gift. So I really want to encourage anyone listening to this, if you have a game that you would like to playtest, that you would like, we really welcome indie games in the Gauntlet community. We would love to have you. And the second and perhaps most important thing is, by the time that you're listening to this podcast, at least the pre-orders, if not the game itself, for the Twilight Throne Beta 1.0 is already going to be coming out. I'm really excited about it. Even in its beta state, it's super playable, and I'm super, super excited to offer it to everybody. So currently, the Twilight Throne is already more than 30,000 words. Wow, in its beta stage. So there's a lot for people to enjoy. A lot to play with. I think it can tell lots of great stories, and I'd love it if you could check it out. Maybe that would be very, very cool.
I definitely will.
Yeah.
And if you need more playtesters, let me know.
Oh yeah, I still have another Throne to playtest, so there's a lot to playtest.
It really is, even at this stage. Even at the stage, I mean, like I said, there's 1,000 words down there now, but it really is a lot of fun, and again, will be of no surprise to anyone who has read any of Rae's stuff before. But the writing, the details in it are so good. There's so many evocative moments written in sort of not playbooks, but in sort of the game material. There's just like so much sparkly imagination in there. So yeah, absolutely check it out.
Oh my gosh! Oh, thank you, David. I'm so happy about that. I can't wait for people to play it.
Hi listeners, I wanted to let you know that new issues of Codex are now available in the Gauntlet Patreon feed. Codex is the Gauntlet's bi-monthly role-playing game magazine. Each issue is organized around a theme and stuffed with brand new material for your table, including original games and supplemental material for games like Trophy and Brindlewood Bay. Check out Codex by going to patreon.com/gauntlet. Your pledge not only gets you Codex and other Gauntlet publications, but it also supports all the important work we do in the Gauntlet, including this very podcast. If you'd like to try before you buy, there's always a free issue of Codex available on our website, gauntlet-rpg.com. And if you're looking for back issues, you can find them on DriveThruRPG, including in reduced price bundles. Thanks.
Listeners, in our second segment, Andrea is going to talk about a topic of her choice. So, Andrea, what did you want to talk about with us today?
I would like to talk about teaching people how to play story-centered games and how we might do that better both as GMs and as game designers, which is a question that I've been thinking about recently. And it came up because I recently played a few games with some less experienced players, and that felt a bit bumpy in places. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's a thing we actually need to explain at some point so they get it, because not everybody picks up the stuff that's between the lines. And I also remembered my own first games, and the very first game I was like, do I role play? Do I speak as my character? Do I describe the actions? How do I even do this?
Right.
How do I differentiate between what my character says and what I say if I don't want to do voices? And how do I signal that this is a question out of character because I don't get something? And I feel like I'm explaining a lot of these things in my own games now because I want people to not worry about that. And then I played, as I said before, my very first PBTA game was Masks. And I was like, what do I even do when there's no GM giving me clues about what the right action might be, or what does play to find out even mean, because nobody explained it to me. And then I played another PBTA game, which was Escape from Dino Island. And I was like, oh, you can do meta talk between the players. You can just decide what scene you would like to see. And then I think I read Monster Hearts and had another moment of, oh, that's how it all works. But it really took this look behind the scenes and playing with some really experienced story gamers who were really good at these things to model that for me to get it. And then also there's an article by Jade Dragon called The Puzzle Maker's Paradox, which is on Medium, which is also about the question that game designers are basically the worst people to solve the problem of on-ramping new players, because our default is to, oh, I can make this better, or how do I fix this? And that's not everybody's approach to problems. And basically in that article, there was another distinction that made a lot of sense to me, which was basically sort of the literary approach, where you like create a mood and a world and try to draw people in, and then sort of drop the rules in there somewhere. And there's the educational approach, where you explain things very clearly and spell them out, and so it's very easy to pick up. And the examples were like Wonder Home is an example of the literary approach, and for example, For the Queen or The Quiet Year is more the educational approach, where it's spelled out very clearly. And that's when I realized I fall very clearly on the educator side, which is also sort of my background. It's part of my job to explain things to people and to create structure in information. Also, as a graphic designer, I always have to wonder, how does the information interact with each other, and when do you need what information?
It's so cool that you're drawing upon all these different aspects of your background.
Yeah, I feel like game design is literally the merging of all of my interests and all of my skills. That is yes, absolutely. And so I probably would always choose clarity over literary beauty. But at the same time, I really, really admire people who are able to write rules text that has so much flavor and mood and atmosphere and has, Wonder Home is a great book to just read, because, it makes you feel things and it makes you imagine things. And I feel like the introductory part of For the Queen does not make you feel that many things, or it does not make you imagine that many things. That comes later.
In Apocalypse World, when you read through the book, right, it's written like you're talking to someone who's really living in that post-apocalyptic world, right? Like there's so much. And I think that was also part of the issue when people started to create Powered by the Apocalypse games, is they forgot how much of the game structure is like pulled into that scarcity and that nature, that theme, right?
Absolutely.
But
absolutely. We kind of touched on those bits that I think are weaker in Masks, are those bits that were kind of just pulled across from Apocalypse World without really doing anything with them, like the finding out information moves and stuff. And I think it is interesting to look back at how how we have learnt those things. And there is so much in the way that Apocalypse World is written, or not just the way, but what is written in Apocalypse World. I still name that as one of my absolute top 5 books to read to learn how to run a game. Apocalypse World is up there for me.
Yeah.
So, I found it very useful in just breaking through and saying, look, these are the things you can do to run a game, to get a story told.
Yeah.
And a lot of that onboarding of information is something that I think, as people who run games, as people who design games, it's very easy to forget that the people you're playing with haven't necessarily read that.
Yeah.
And don't have all those ideas bubbling away at the back of their head constantly.
And they don't come from a tradition of having played Dungeons and Dragons for 20 years and have these assumptions that come with that experience. And and don't necessarily, I feel like it's becoming more common for people to just try things without anyone being experienced in the game. Like, I feel like I'm constantly playing games where the person GMing or facilitating is like, this is the first time I'm running this. Let's figure this out together. And that is, especially if you play like smaller games or lots of one-shots, that's a very common experience getting into a game. I do that like all the time. And I feel like there's also this, even if you've explained the mechanics in a way that is very clear, there's still this, how do I make a character that enables interaction with other characters? Like, some people are shy and will default to, I'm playing very lonely character who doesn't interact much, is very introverted, it does things by themselves, and that's a cool person to be, but it's not necessarily a great character to play, because you don't give the other players hooks to interact with that character, and then you don't get interaction and story. So how do you teach that? How do you teach how to set up a scene? How do you teach playing towards using mechanics, for example, a PBTA move? Or how do you teach playing towards another character's goals or weaknesses or moves, so you enable them to do that thing that's on their character sheet or in their playbook? I don't necessarily have a solution for all these questions, because I'm asking them myself. I have some ideas about things where I think people have done that and tried that and it worked, and we can build on that. For example, I already mentioned it before, Firebrands games, I feel are really, really good at teaching you how to set up a scene. It's literally spelled out. Who is there? Like, you are the player and you pick a partner or several partners. Where are you? How did we get to share a meal, a duel, a dance, an intimate moment together? And then there's always this, what do we notice? What have we heard? And then it's basically breaking down, setting up a scene. And then you have the lists of questions and actions and responses. And that is basically how to have a dialogue that moves things and that makes you feel things.
And what I like about Firebrands is that you can just stick to the back and forth, just choosing the prompts, or you can build on it if you like, but you're still playing the game no matter what, right?
I love, again, going back to my mentioned earlier in the math thing, is again, it's that idea of like giving people a license. The fact that it specifically says right there, if all you do is just read out the text that is written on the page, that's fine. You're not doing it wrong. You're not doing it badly. That is playing the game fine. You can do that. It's okay. And I think that's a really important sort of affirmation when you are teaching a game to someone.
And actually something that was really jarring to me was one time I was playing on a stream and all the other players, I had a really hard time because we were playing a belonging outside belonging game, right? We were playing Arhant, which is a game I made about ghosts hanging out in a mansion, a creepy, cozy game. And so the difficulty was, I realized at first, the first scene, everybody was trying to play like a certain streamed game of the dragon game. So everyone was acting and everyone was trying to do this like improv acting. And they were really, I could tell that they were confused every time I asked questions like, oh, do you want to do this in the scene? Or what do you think about doing this? And they were like, oh no, I'm just gonna, like, they refused to talk out of character at first. And I was like, wow, this is not, like, I realized that it's the way that TTRPGs are played as a form of entertainment for people to watch is I don't like to play TTRPGs that way. I'm not here to act with other people. I'm not here to be an improv actor. I'm here to create a story and collaborate. If that's something you want to do and that's something you enjoy, yes, right? But I feel like a lot of TTRPGs, especially story games, especially PBTA, encourage you to have that meta conversation, right? So ever since then, I was like, I have to include examples. So that's why our haunt is full of examples of people just talking to each other and playing, because I wanted to include that.
Yes. And I think examples of play are such an underrated element of game text.
Absolutely.
Because it basically what it does is it tries to replace this, you're sitting at a table and other people do this and you can just learn from them. And I feel like, again, what's difficult about Firebrands games, it's so much text and everybody feels overwhelmed when they play them for the first time, including myself. And you need, like, your third Firebrands game is probably going to be the one where you feel like, okay, I'm kind of getting this. And so that's a hurdle that, you want people to have this good stuff and to learn this good stuff, but it's hard to get there. And I feel like at the same time, I feel like there's so many good elements. For example, Brindlewood Bay has the paint the scene questions where you describe elements that illustrate meaning because you respond to a question again. And I've also seen that, that's difficult for people who are not as good as being spontaneously creative, or who think, I have to have a really good idea. And so you have to constantly add, any idea is good. What you think is boring, other people will think is brilliant. And just go for it.
Yeah. I also want to include, I notice people who talk like that, like they say, well, by the time we get to the 6th hour of playing, I'm like, you don't have to play for 6 hours. If it's a creative game where you make up stuff, 3 hours is more than enough.
Yeah.
Right?
But and I think sort of what you were saying as well is also another thing that is important to consider is that like pretty much anything, playing role-playing games is a skill. The more you do it, the better you will get. It's like, it's great to think, and I mean, and let's be real, I mean, we're doing this to have fun as a hobby in general, ignoring for the time being streaming, what have you. There isn't we're not being judged, we're not competing for points. Everyone will have a good time, even if you think, I wasn't very good. If you enjoyed it and everyone else enjoyed it, then that's all you needed to do.
That's all that matters.
And if next time you are better than you were the time before, cool. Yeah. All the better. Yeah. And I think that's sort of an important thing to keep in mind as well, particularly when talking about, like I said, onboarding new players to the game. Is it's like, it's bad to assume that they will already know what they need to do, but also they shouldn't assume that they will be, or that they should be at the top of their game the very first time they do something. It's a
Yes, that is so important. Like it's okay to be bad at this at the beginning. It's okay to be bad at anything in the beginning, and you do it more and you automatically get better. And especially if you're curious and try to figure out how other people that you think are good are doing it, or you just ask them, how do you do that? But then I'm an educator, and I always want to sort of lower that barrier, make it easier, and be more inviting and more welcoming to people, and just allow even people with massive social anxiety and lots of worries that they're doing it wrong to come into the game and feel welcome and feel like they have a spot and they can do things that are good, even out of the box. And I want to mention another example of things that I really enjoyed, which is again in Jesebe's Bed and Breakfast, where I feel like there's so many hidden rules and so many hidden things in the text. It tells you a story, and that story basically sets up the conflicts that are expected, or the character arcs that are expected. And for me, it's very easy to pick up on stuff like that. And then I played with a different person who was like, who didn't notice that, who didn't even realize there was something there to get. And then I ended up doing a lot of prompting, and then I felt like I should not prescribe their play that much if they want to do something else, but I kind of also wanted to do what the character or what the chapter set up, and so that was a weird conflict to have. And I think that's just, I mean, basically I feel like it comes down to no one method of onboarding fits everybody.
Exactly.
Some people need really clear structures and rules and everything spelled out in words. and other people do much better if they get a mood and an atmosphere, and then they will riff off that, and there's rules, and that's all fine, and you just need to figure out what works for you and what works for the people you're playing with. And I feel like as a GM or facilitator, you need to be flexible in fulfilling these needs, so whoever is at your table can participate and can get what the game is about.
Yeah, in whatever way that is fun for them. Yeah. Actually, I do want to bring up real quick in that, so in Wander Home, there are examples of play, and the only reason that they're there is because J Dragon hired me among many other consultants, and I suggested you should have examples of play because I love what I'm reading, but I can imagine someone being like, so how do I play the game? And we had to have a conversation about it because Jay didn't want to write that at first, because Jay was like, I don't want to tell people how to play the game. I want them to play however they want to. And I was like, yes, but there will be some people who will be like, I can't imagine it at all.
I was that person.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so, but Jay did this really amazing thing where instead, and I once again, it's not the best solution for everybody, right? But in the example play, there are people who are playing the game with the rules, but there's also one person who doesn't interact with the rules and doesn't play with the game in the expected, typical TTRPG way. And it was very important for Jay to put in that person to be like, you can play Wander Home however you want to, even if it's not playing the game, right?
And that was so helpful to have this. And there's one play that I feel like there's one example where they play in person and one where they play online, and then somebody has prepared a lot of stuff and somebody is just there, and that's great. And I feel like that opened up so much variety on these are ways how you can play the game. These are the kinds of people you can be to play this game. And I really got a lot from these few examples that are in there. And because I struggled with how this is a great book to read. It made me feel lots of things, and I really loved reading it. And then I was like, how does this make a game? How does this make a story in the widest sense of the word? Like what happens once we start playing? And that helped to sort of get some bits and pieces, and then you can riff off that and build on that and make your own. And some people won't need that, and that's fine too. They can just skip those. But I thought that was really, really helpful.
Yeah, I think it can be a good replacement for, because these days with PBTA games, I've run and played so many PBTA games, I can pretty much pick it up and go and be fine with it. But certainly when it comes to other games, I like to play first before I have to run or facilitate something, because I find I pick up so much more from the act of playing than I do from reading the book. Even if the book is perfectly well written and well laid out, there's just about being at the table that does something more. And that is, even if I'm there and I'm sort of going through, I'm thinking, I'm pretty sure you're running this game completely wrong. And I don't think you're doing a good job of running this game, if I'm honest. Even if that's my experience of playing it with someone else for the first time, it's still helpful to me, kind of thing. And
it helps concretize everything.
Yeah. And I think that's something that those examples of play can help with and sort of replace that experience.
Yeah.
But we're sort of coming up to time now. So I was wondering if you have any last thoughts.
I wanted to sort of wrap that up with my current conclusion. And I feel like I think the literary style is very important to create mood and atmosphere, and to have that in a rules text, I think is really good in most cases. I mean, there's always exceptions, right? And I'm trying to get better at that. At the more, like, what is the mood of this game? What do I want people to feel in this world that I'm offering them to play in?
Yeah.
And at the same time, I kind of feel like that's sort of, I need two different things. I need one thing to get into the mood and just feel like, oh yes, I want to play this. And then I need the rules as pared down as they possibly can be for quick reference while I'm playing this. Because for the world, I cannot find the sentence that explains when to do what, and when it's a sentence, my brain will not pick that when I'm scrolling through rules text. So I feel like that's partly we've solved that problem with reference sheets and player handouts and rules summaries, and I just feel like that's good to have even I feel like the next time I'm facilitating Joseba's bed and breakfast, I will definitely make myself a rules sheet for the chapter with just this location allows you this action, and you get a token if you do that, and you have to. So just the mechanics, so they don't get lost in the story. And so yeah, that's where I'm currently at with the let's have both is good approach.
Right.
No, absolutely. That was super interesting. Yeah, thank you for that. It's a topic I wouldn't have thought of myself, but I find really it is something I do think about quite often. And I thought it was yeah. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Andrea.
Yes, thank you for letting me talk about things and talking with me, and I really enjoyed that.
Listeners, for our last segment, we each discuss something that is lately inspiring us or giving us joy. We call this Giving Me Life. I'm going to start with my lovely co-host, David. I'm going to do my best little voice. What is giving you life, David?
Excellent, thank you. In theory, it's not so much giving me life as taking it away. But I had my birthday of a significant round number last week.
What a way to put it!
But for my birthday, me and my partner, we went out for like a proper fancy meal at a fine dining restaurant, and it was an amazing experience. It was like proper kind of tasting menu and wine pairings and all that sort of very, very nice stuff. So, and like the experience in and of itself was amazing. The food was amazing and everything. But what was really funny was like literally like the week before, there had been a newspaper article that kind of went mildly viral in the corner of Twitter that I look at by a lady called Kirsty Bosley, who is a journalist writer in Birmingham, who had actually written about the experience of going out to, as someone. So she was speaking as someone who isn't really is in no way a foodie. That going out for that sort of food experience isn't something that she would do as a normal course of events kind of thing. And she wrote this really nice article about the experience she had and how it affected her and her feelings around it, which I thought was really interesting as well, because it kind of pushed back on a lot of the dialogue that you get around, if you spend a lot of money and you get your food on small plates, then you've obviously been ripped off and it's all, a thing. It's like, well, actually, that's very much not true. And yet, obviously, if you're just looking at pictures on photos of it, it's like, yeah, that's one thing. But the experience of actually being there, the environment, the quality of the food, the attentiveness of the people who work there, the knowledge and expertise of the people that work there. It's all the work that goes into making that experience is what you are paying the money for. And why should that looked at as being a kind of weird thing where, when you look at what you pay for like going down to watch like a Premier League football game or whatever, it's still spending a lot of money on something that's over in 90 minutes. And it's I thought that was a really nice article.
Get a really expert haircut.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. So I think it was sort of a fun, like I said, my own personal experience of it was also amazing, and it was just funny that it just happened to follow right on the tail of that moment. And and if you do get a chance to check out that article, it's I think it's in the Birmingham Mail and it's a newspaper, but it was a really nice little read.
I remember seeing the headline on Twitter and thinking, I should read that, and then I never did, but now I want to.
Yeah.
And so, Andrea, what about you? What's giving you life lately?
Oh, I'm currently catching up on season 4 of Star Trek Discovery, and it's always still giving me life. And I'm still not over the fact that I can watch Star Trek and see an extended bridge Star Trek scene with a fully populated bridge, and there is the only person who is remotely a white man is a weird alien, and literally everybody else is a woman, is a person of color, and that does things to me. It tells me things are possible.
The non-binary character and the trans characters.
They're rarely on the bridge, but yes,
so much.
Absolutely.
But throughout the show, oh my gosh, there's a part where they turned to him and they were like,
yes.
"I see you." I'm getting teary-eyed just thinking about it. Anyway, I'm really happy with where Star Trek is. Discovery is. It's so good.
And the only complaint I have about the late season 4, at least the part that I've arrived at, it needs more Tilly.
That's true.
I love Tilly so much.
Come back.
Yeah, and I feel like there's so many good characters that I all want to have detailed long stories about, and yeah. But just really the visual of, wait, there's no white dude on the bridge. And yeah, to compare that to other series of Star Trek where you have that one woman, or you have that one person of color, or you have like a small assortment in the background, but the main character is still all white people. And yeah, I just love that this is possible now, and that this is like mainstream media and not just some weird thing that you need to go to a weird niche art movie festival to see. And yeah, that is giving me life.
For me, what's giving me life is I started playing Destiny 2 again. I say again, but I first started playing Destiny 2 years ago when it first came out, dropped off within a year for various reasons, but I got back into it just about a month ago because of the Witch Queen expansion. I've been having so much fun. It's been really, really good. I really enjoy the shooty, pew, loot thing. It has this beautiful aesthetic, like the sort of Star Wars mystical. It's really funny because basically it's D&D in space is what Destiny is.
Great.
And I really enjoy D&D if it's in space in this way. Like there's just a specific, and the new bad guy, the villain, well, she's new to me. She's absolutely amazing. I love her so much. The Witch Queen is everything. So I've really been enjoying it. I get to play with my partner and my friends. It's also a way to socialize. I haven't, especially my friends Pancake and Phil, we used to hang out and play TTRPGs every week. I haven't seen them in, since before the Panini. So it's been more than 2 years since I've seen them in person. So it's great to play with them regularly. So that's been giving me life.
Yeah.
Also, did we hear it here first? A Rae Space 5e hack. Is that...
Okay, so though our podcasts are supposed to be timeless, as we're recording this, our dear listeners, 2 crises have grabbed our attention. We'd like to ask that you consider making a donation to one or both of these charities if you are able. If you are not, please spread the word. These are www.transtexas.org. has an emergency relief fund to helping those impacted by this horrific new policy in Texas. We have to protect our trans youth. And also Doctors Without Borders is working within Ukraine, and you can donate to them at www.doctorswithoutborders.org. We will have links to both of these organizations in the show notes. But thank you so much for listening. That is our show. And thank you so much for playing with us, everyone on the Gauntlet. You can check out the show notes for links about the games we discussed, and you can find out more about the Gauntlet at www.gauntlet-rpg.com, where you can find articles, podcast info, and links to our forums. You can also follow us on Twitter at GauntletRPG. If you're interested in playing with the Gauntlet, please play with us. Please bring your playtest. Please hang out with us. Do check out our forums or check out our Patreon at patreon.com/gauntlet. Remember, the hard part is spelling gauntlet right, apparently. So that is the thing. I would just say it really quickly. That is GAUNTLET, right? Okay. But thank you so much. And thank you again, Andrea, for coming on the show. And thank you, David, for being my wonderful co-host.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been great.
Yeah, it's been lovely to chat with you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.